But I felt it was a good, the right thing to do, and to have a three-way debate at this stage.
Yes.
I'm going to kick off with a pre-prepared one. And Damien, I'm going to start it off with you. Okay, so you're very pro attribution. And if attribution is such a great thing, then when you did that audience participation, there weren't very many people that kept their hands up. Why are not more advertisers using attribution modeling?
I think first, let me clarify. I'm pro better measurement.
Okay.
I'm not really pro attribution. I just see attribution as the solution for better measurement that's available, and I see it as the best thing that is available in terms of measuring advertising at the moment. The reason why people don't use attribution is almost completely down to accessibility. I named two things during I think my little speech. The first was around complexity. I think attribution is often described in really, really complex ways. I've had meetings with attribution vendors where I've left and thought I didn't understand a word of that meeting. And people see it as being hugely costly as well. I think removing those barriers and making it more accessible is really the solution. And I think that really has started to happen over the past 12 months.
Lewis, what would you say to that?
I guess the way that, I am obviously pro measurement, and I do accept that there is some value in attribution. But I guess the point that I'd make is that just dividing up the sales that have happened in a slightly different way isn't really interesting to the CEO. That's why they don't look at it, because they're interested in how the business is growing. So it's a kind of tactical thing, dividing the sales up. And I think people get far too wrapped up in it being actually going to make a difference. It really is just a tool which helps you understand and do your optimization better. And in my opinion, the fuss about the mechanism for doing that sharing is virtually irrelevant. If you just do something which identifies some value to all of the touch points in the journey, it's good enough. Whether you share it according to some fancy rule set doesn't really make very much difference. So it's just nuance. I think ultimately we are fairly close in our opinions, but it's that nuance of where you spend your time and your focus.
Yeah. Richard, I'm sure you've come across this before, but it's a great question. What's the best way to deal with directors and other senior board members who use mainly GA reporting, even if attribution is available, and they use GA reporting on a last click model to make their business decisions, because that's what they've always done, and their year over year analysis is based upon that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult challenge. Building into that, I agree with Lewis that at that level you're not really going to care about how you're dividing up the credit or what the models are saying. But I think probably where we differ is that I think we can show by testing, optimization at granular level with some of these data-driven models that we can deliver a significant impact in terms of better results from digital media campaigns, and that is very much something that they are going to care about. So I would say what we need to do, certainly, and a big part of this is on the vendors who produce these solutions like Google, but actually talk more about frameworks of testing and how we can demonstrate the impact, which is very interesting all the way through an organization, and less about this is the theory behind the modeling. But and then on top of that, I think a good way of doing it is and this is probably where we fall down a lot, is don't jump straight to an enterprise version with a high cost that requires a great deal of setup, and actually have a plan that if you're currently optimizing to last click, what are the free solutions that I can put a testing framework in place that hopefully will show a level of incremental value over and above what I'm doing, and then that's a business case to build from there, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when I speak to businesses, I always describe attribution as being a journey, and you can't go from last click wins measurement through to the most fancy model ever built straight away. There are steps to get there so that you can get the buy-in of internal stakeholders.
Lewis, why can't you go straight to that? Why can't you just break the mold and go straight to attribution modeling?
I tried for a long time.
Yeah? Yeah.
No, I think you can do, but there's just not that much point in doing it. The value will come from just having some exposure to understanding what the early channels are that make sales, understanding which channels drive new customers, or as I was talking about, farm existing customers, or however you want to phrase it. Those are far more important than knowing whether it's, the value of this keyword was 5,300 or 4,800. It just doesn't make any difference. It's about understanding that that's the type of keyword which seems to contribute to these types of purchasers and changes their behaviour.
I would tend to agree on some of that, but I think where it then becomes a challenge is you actually need to implement something in the bid strategies that you're running today, and actually, probably my strong argument would be you're better off and you're going to drive a lot of incremental value if you move to a data-driven model than if
That's exactly.
I do think that's true if you can agree it.
Yeah.
But I mean, most organisations just melt down into a horrible debate where you suddenly get the CEO trying to understand game theory or something, and it's entirely pointless.
Yeah.
So it's practicalities, but I mean, ultimately it should work and you should bid better. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
The thing that all this forgets, though, is that most of the solutions ignore creative completely. And I mean, we're in advertising, a lot of us, and they seem to completely fail to have any measurement which relates to the quality of your products, or your creative, and all the other things that I talked about, like returns and delivery.
Do you think that's true even with data-driven attribution?
Well, the vast
where
majority.
the attribution model is updating every 2 to 3 hours?
Well, you like to think it wouldn't be, but I mean, I still fail to see enough emphasis going into the quality of creative, and that must reflect the fact that people they can't measure the impact of it. And yet, as a human being, I know that there are rubbish ads which have no effect, and there are fantastic ads which are brilliant. And so, it obviously isn't reflecting that.
That's a really valid point, and the actual quality of creative isn't necessarily captured in the attribution reporting models. How do you guys kind of counter that? Richard, what have you seen in terms of the way that businesses who are doing attribution modelling are trying to account for the quality of the creative in its engagement, for example?
Yeah, I think you can to an extent, depending on how you're looking at splitting up the channel level within your attribution model. But I also think that goes back to the slide I showed on digital attribution being a part of what you're doing, albeit that I would argue a valuable part, but you should also be looking at how you're doing A/B testing, various levels of incrementality tests that look at creatives and actually what's the performance of the creative, and almost using that as a separate lever to help influence your creative strategy versus just saying, right, digital attribution on its own, as we're talking about it here, is going to solve for all of those things.
Yeah. Damien, there was a good question here for you. Let me find that again. Excuse me. Okay, no, I don't know what that. There it is. So, there's a lot coming in, so keeping track of that. Damien, if there was a scalable way to A/B test and measure the incremental value of a channel, where's it gone? It's moved. Incremental value of a channel. Would you take that over the more expensive, costly attribution modelling?
If there was a scalable and accessible way of doing that.
To A/B testing.
Incrementality is the ultimate objective. I actually think that data-driven attribution and some of the more advanced models which are out there are getting there. If you look at actually Richard mentioned it in his presentation, the more advanced data-driven attribution models out there look at both converting and non-converting journeys, which means that they are looking at incrementality.
Yeah. Richard, you presented 2 attribution tools that are coming our way, Attribution 360 and Attribution. And there's some questions in here which I'm going to kind of theme, which are relating to newer businesses, so business startups or smaller organisations that potentially don't have the legacy measurement models or a legacy board of directors to worry about. How can they use potentially the attribution tool rather than the Attribution 360 to start that journey faster than some bigger organisations might be able to?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think we'll even, as Damien just alluded to, there are a lot of reporting models in the free version of Google Analytics that you can look at. But then I think the value proposition of Google Attribution for those types of advertisers will plug into AdWords and Google Analytics, both free platforms, and bring in data from those sources and allow a level of attribution reporting that you can then push back out to those platforms where you're likely to be doing a big proportion of your media buying as well. So yeah, I think that would be a great place to start, and certainly not have a big barrier to entry in terms of either setup, which I think is sometimes ignored, a big one, but also cost.
Yeah. Speaking of cost, can we talk about the cost of GA360 today? There's a question in there, so I'm going to ask it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a monthly cost, which is pretty similar to analytics. At the moment, we're in the beta phase, so we don't really have that costing for us in stage, but it's going to come, the Attribution 360 solution will come with a similar cost to what you look at for the premium version of analytics.
Yep. Lewis, everyone's very keen to know. There's a few questions in here. Lewis, where's it gone? Oh yeah, Lewis. We use Attribution to track customer brand loyalty initiation through tracking customer lifetime value. Mm-hmm. And this has come up a couple of times. How did your wife first find out about Net-a-Porter?
That's a great question. But yeah, it's absolutely right that there must have been some sense that advertising of some sort, or recommendation, I don't know what it is. But I do recognise that loyal customers are ultimately, initially created by marketing. But the point is, it's like, I'm not going to be too aggressive to them today, but Google claims an awful lot of credit for being a navigation tool to refine Net-a-Porter, which is fine, but they make an awful lot of money doing that. And that needs to be separated in your analysis of what's advertising and what is, whatever you want to call that Google do for you over there. And you need to make sure that that's very, very clear. And so yes, I do concede that you obviously do need to advertise, and it does create customers, and you should focus your attention on knowing how valuable the customers are that your marketing actually creates. So I am really keen on measurement, really.
Excellent. We've had a fourth participant wade into the debate here, and it's going to be my last one because all these numbers say 0 here. The participant is Freeview. Owen, I think. Hello, Freeview here. We use Google Attribution 360 to track the impact of TV advertising on traffic, on online traffic. It correlates with other data points, so we think that it works. Just saying. Thank you very much, Owen. And we are out of time, so ladies and gentlemen, please, thank you very much to our panel judges. Very good.